Hello, Recovery fam. Welcome back to the Unashamed Recovery Podcast. I am your host, Josh.
And I'm your co-host, Drew. And this is Season 4, Episode 40, Breaking the Bad. Today, we're looking at the bad behaviors of addiction and how to stop acting like the addict version of ourselves and acting like the new version of ourselves. Basically, just taking off some of those old behaviors is like taking off the old clothes. You know, you get a little dirty when we're in addiction, but you know, sometimes we don't realize that we're still wearing the old rags instead of putting on something new. So it's going to talk about a little self-care and some other things in this.
That's right. Today's episode verse, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show, but today's episode verse is going to come from the good book of Galatians, chapter 5 and 16. And just to give you a tad bit of that, so I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it is.
That's definitely a good one.
So, without further delay,
roll that beautiful beam footage.
Yeah, roll that beautiful beam footage.
The Unashamed Recovery Podcast.
The Unashamed Recovery Podcast with Josh and Drew starts now.
Here at the Unashamed Recovery Podcast, we believe that there is healing in the story of our scars and that it is okay to not be okay.
It is our mission, our sole mission, to break the shame and stigma of addiction and recovery by sharing real stories of real addiction from real people and real recovery and real sobriety.
And when we're not sharing those real stories, we like to bring you recovery topics straight from a biblical perspective. Just like today's episode and just like our last episode, we're taking a look at a familiar recovery topic and looking at it from another angle. Breaking those bad behaviors is relevant to all of us working on our sobriety and working our recovery, because without a change, we will just pick up another bad habit, another bad behavior to replace the old one. In recovery, we must remember that old ways won't open new doors. If we want something new, we must be prepared to do something new.
You're going to have to do something different, like something completely outside of the spectrum of the box that you've lived in for so long. I made a post the other day about how we basically stay in survival mode. Like, we don't even realize we're in survival mode. Now, for people who don't understand what survival mode is, that's where you're still distancing yourself from people. You're still building up walls against people. Some of those walls can be healthy, but at the same time, when people are trying to help, we build walls against people who actually care about us. And so we actually start shorting ourselves on our support supply,
I can see that.
Yeah, so basically we're pushing all these people out because we're just basically trying to make it through a day. How many times have we said that I'm just trying to make it through the day, one day at a time? Of course, that's what we live for.
That white knuckling it.
But at some point you're going to have to relax and just drive the car instead of letting the car drive you. And so that's kind of, what we're getting on right now is the fact that some of these behaviors are you still white knuckling it down the road, not paying attention to God's GPS. That's how I feel about it, because I've been, if I can be personal about it and be a little vulnerable, like this past month alone, right before I got up to my 5-year mark was completely terrible. I think life was throwing everything that it could at me. The devil was on my back. I mean, it was just everything that could happen and go wrong, I felt like did. So it's just, and I had to pay attention to the behaviors and things.
Yeah.
But
for me personally, in my own recovery, and I've always noticed that whenever I'm getting close to quote unquote leveling up, moving to that next level,
milestones.
Yeah, that next milestone, that enemy is coming harder and he's changing his tactics. He's bringing something that I've never seen before.
Right.
To kind of throw me off, to get me to stumble, to get me to start going backwards. So, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of our listeners out there can relate to this. This isn't something that just me and Drew is struggling with. This is something that we know for a fact that the recovery community, the hashtag recovery posse, is dealing with. So today we're going to talk about some ways that that we can kind of change that bad behavior, replace that bad behavior, and that we can start having some good, I hate to say good behavior, but we're replacing the bad so that we can continue on a healthy recovery journey. Is that how you would phrase it, Drew?
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Like it's just something that I learned in different, so many meetings. I've been through AA, NA, Celebrate Recovery, which has been the best one. Not to be, okay, I'm a little partial. I might be a little biased there.
I am too.
But through all of these, the one thing that I've noticed is you can be somebody that stops using.
Yes.
And still be an addict.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
You can stop using the unhealthy behavior, and you can
the substance. Even just you can stop using the substance, but the unhealthy behavior sits.
Yes.
For me, I relied so much on my anger to get me out of a pinch that it became like a drug. I was livid. If I could get livid or mad off of something, that was almost a high. And it was insane how that works. But once again, living an addict lifestyle, it's insanity.
Or how about a common one? We just had an episode with Stacy. How many of us, we get out of that alcoholic addiction, that the cocaine addiction, the meth addiction, and for the first time in our life, we're enjoying food.
Oh my goodness.
And we began that unhealthy journey with food. Now we have a food addiction. So
I'm having to reprimand some of that as we speak right now as well. Yeah, I guess that's why this subject kind of hits home for me is, I didn't realize 18 months in, I was still living an addict lifestyle. I was still in an apartment, didn't really have much food in the refrigerator, didn't have, I was just living off the bare minimum. People who wanted to come by were just kind of like, I'll meet you somewhere and talk to you. Just, I wasn't really open to the change that was needing to happen. And so that really stunted my growth, my early on growth in recovery. And I wasn't really wanting to let God in. I wasn't really I wasn't being as vulnerable as I needed to be. I wasn't being as humble as I needed to be, my pride. And that's the one thing that eats us up as addicts. It's pride.
Yep.
Because we get away from the shame finally. We get away from saying, oh man, the woe is me, and then all of a sudden we start sticking our chin up, poking our chest out a little bit, and then we act like we don't need it.
We're just a little bit better than we used to be.
Just a tiny bit, but we don't.
So let me let that chest out. So yeah, it's an easy trap to fall into. So with today's episode, we're just gonna go ahead and just dive into it. The first thing that I can think of on the list that will help you overcome the bad habits that you done got yourself into in order to grow and move forward is you've got to recognize the importance of self-awareness. What do you think?
Self-awareness and self-care. I think you could add that in.
Yeah.
And when I'm saying self-care and self-awareness, we're not talking about going to get pedicures and manicures. I mean, all that stuff is great. I mean, whatever you do that floats your boat to make you smile. But at the same time, if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty, dealing with some of the trauma issues, that goes into self-care. And that's how you start gaining some self-awareness. So the one thing that I noticed that you do talk about is the fact that, you understand your triggers. You understand what's going to send you over the edge, what's going to send you over the top. And that's what I've gained from you is, in learning as we keep going down this road together. I watch, I'll learn, and I hear some of the things you say and I take heed and I use it. But now that I'm starting to understand some of the triggers, I'm noticing that some of this bad behavior is starting to subside. Because I'm starting to see, all right, danger zone. Yep. Let's put a fence around that. Let's, not tiptoe around it, but understand what we're walking into.
And for those of you that are taking notes at home, trigger awareness is a form of self-care.
Yep.
You're taking care of yourself, your recovery by being aware of those trigger areas. So I just want to throw that out there, just for those taking notes.
But, the biggest thing about self-care is your mindset, how you talk to yourself. I believe it's stated, I want to say, me, I count things in the Bible, and I do it all the time. And somebody, tell me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think it's like 20-something times where they say, as you think, you become, in the New Testament. Basically saying, if you think like Jesus does, then you'll be like Jesus. And so as you think, you become. How many times are we thinking to ourselves something negative? We don't like something or...
And some of us, that goes back to our environment because we were raised in that.
Yeah.
And you're like, Josh, Drew, I can't get out of that. Like that's who I am. That's a product of my upbringing. Okay, well, that's where Romans 12:2 comes in. Don't be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the keyword renewing of your mind. You have to renew your mind through Christ, and that's when you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. When we're in our higher power, Jesus Christ, we get that renewing of our mind. We're able to think differently. We're able to do differently than the old us.
Right. So the thing that I heard is God allows us to go through a valley so we learn how to climb the mountain. Ooh. That way we can keep that endurance, and I think a lot of times we get tired. I get exhausted in my recovery. And so we start not doing this or not doing that. And in that self-awareness thing, that's where that kicks in, is when we got to recognize where we're getting tired at, but not necessarily cut out church. And I see a lot of people, that's the first thing they cut out is meetings in church, and I think you started this with God. You can't get away from it. God's the only way you're going to keep going through this and making it day by day. 1,000 people ask me on a daily basis. It feels like they might not be 1,000. I might be exaggerating. Big fish here. People ask me on a daily basis, like, how do you do it? I wish I could say that it was everything that I was taught. It's mainly God. And the way, when I start disconnecting myself from him, that's when my recovery starts to fail.
Yep.
When I start putting myself in that little cage and I start going back into survival mode and I say that I got it and I'm not going to rely on God to do anything, that's when I start to fail, So,
yep, most definitely. And you were talking about perseverance and being tired. Just to plug, if that's you and you're going through some tiredness and you're struggling with perseverance, go back and listen to our previous episode, Staying the Course. It's a great episode. You'll learn a lot. So with that, moving forward, number two.
Dropping plugs.
Yeah, I'm dropping plugs. Hey, we got to promote, man.
Hey, man, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm applauding you over here.
So, number two. We got to develop some new coping mechanisms. Our old coping mechanisms are not going to help us get good behaviors. We're going to have to replace, if we're struggling with substance use, we're going to have to replace that with healthier alternatives.
Yeah.
If you just really like the taste of beer, they make non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah, but that's still that's a thin line. You're walking a thin line when you do that. So you're putting yourself in a danger zone. Just be aware, that we're definitely not promoting anything like that.
Yes, we're not promoting that. But I'm just saying we have to find a healthier alternative.
I'm not getting on to you, Josh. I know it kind of sounded like it, but it is. That's like people with the CBD and all that kind of stuff. It's a thin line, but it's up to you.
I mean, I've talked with several people through our Twitter page who have used MAT recovery as a way to come off of meth. The medication. I'm struggling. What the MAT? Y'all know what I'm talking about. The MAT recovery with the medication. They're using that to come down from some severe addictions, and then they're able to wean themselves off once again.
So that goes back to kind of like the End It All episode.
End it for good.
End it for good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Angela. Please don't hate me for that.
Don't pull your sponsorship in for good. We still love y'all.
Hearts. Another thing, if nothing changes, right? So the changes that need to be made obviously have to come from within, and it has to start with mindset. But you have to explore what stresses you out, and that's going to sound crazy.
Yep.
That's going to sound crazy as all get out. But when we're new to it, you have to figure out what pushes your buttons. There's little things, man, that I didn't even know that triggered me because I would ignore it because I was high all the time.
Yeah.
But now here's the craziest one: people biting forks. For some odd reason, that is the biggest pet peeve. I didn't even notice it until one day I was sitting there. So you could just hear it, and for some, I wanted to blow up, and it just, but that sent me into another place, and then I was relying, and I stayed right there in that mad spot for a couple of days, but it started with that trigger.
Well, I mean, like with me, I gave up my porn and sex addiction, and I now struggle with anger, and that's what I'm working on in Celebrate Recovery is my anger. And one of my triggers is road rage, like other people driving. Now, I very well cannot just stop driving, but what I've had to do is I've had to change my driving habits to accommodate others.
Yeah.
To go on a more of a defensive driving, I got to be responsive of others on the road. Like if I got a guy who's tailgating me, well, then I need to either go ahead and slow down or pull to the side of the road and let him get on by me, or he is going to set me off.
Right.
And that's one of those ways of managing that trigger, that stress.
And, kind of exercising or exploring it.
Yeah.
And you got to exercise your recovery. You got to take it for a walk, man. And that's one of those things where you're taking it for a walk.
Yep.
And like I said, it sounds insane, but that's doing something different.
Yep. That's it. So this next one is actually going to go back to something that you've already talked about. The third way is you've got to address underlying issues and trauma. That's a big topic for you right there.
Oh man, I've been on that soapbox for at least a year now. We're just going into trauma. We're talking about like the effects of it, childhood trauma, how we're still living some of this trauma out. Matter of fact, it's been such a passion of mine to try to figure out how to get people to understand that dealing with that trauma is the only way you're going to heal it.
Yep.
You have to look at it.
So I did not know this, but we store trauma in our body.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I've been watching some stuff on TikTok about releasing stored trauma, and it's like some stretches and stuff like you can do.
It sits in your core,
and you can just see it. So I reached out to Shauna to ask her about it, and she gave me some stuff. But anyway, I had no clue that was even a thing.
So I know we don't talk about our spouse as much, but my wife, she's dealt with some trauma in her life, and she didn't realize that her body posture was kind of closed off. Yeah. She didn't realize it until I was like, wow, you kind of look closed off. Are you okay? And then, we got to talking about it even further, and she was got to digging in, and she was just like, I don't know why, but I kind of feel like I'm hugging myself. It's just one of those things. It's self-soothing. Yes, there it is.
You owe me a Coke. But,
you didn't do the pinch poke.
But with trauma, guys, it's super important that when you start getting into this stuff, always, if you can, try to seek professional help, such as therapy or counseling. I have a great therapist that I go to. Yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I pray. And yes, I go to therapy. There's nothing wrong with going to therapy and praying to Jesus.
I'm smiling right now because I have a big mouth, as you all can tell in this episode. And so I have 2 therapists because 1 hour is not enough.
Well, this is also coming from a guy who took 2 episodes to tell his testimony. Mm-hmm. But that's neither here nor there.
Oh my goodness.
But when you go and you start that therapy and that counseling, you're going to uncover root causes of behaviors that you've buried. And that's whenever you find healing. Write that one down, circle it, highlight it, go ahead and put a reminder in your phone to schedule a therapy session, a counseling session. Get somebody that you can easily talk to and that you trust, because that's key.
I mean, sometimes even just sitting, I know a lot of addicts that are like me. You store so much of this stuff in, and you've compartmentalized it to the fact that you don't even want to open the drawers. It's a locked file cabinet. You get to a point to where talking about it's going to release so much off of you. It's going to get so much of the baggage out of your pockets. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But for some odd reason, we just want to hold on to it. It's like a dirty diaper, man, that we just won't release.
Yep. And we got to move forward, we've got to release it.
Yep.
And speaking of moving forward, number 4, practicing self-compassion and forgiveness. Self-compassion and forgiveness. We've got to embrace mistakes as a part of the recovery journey.
My mistakes were my biggest learning tool. Every time I made a mistake, even through my relapse, I hate to say, my relapse was one of my greatest tools ever, because without it, I probably wouldn't be sitting where I'm at. Yeah. That was rock bottom underneath rock bottom.
People all the time talk about, don't talk about relapses, and you're encouraging people. We're not encouraging people to relapse. By no means are we encouraging people to relapse, because some people do not make it back from a relapse. But like for me, I had that relapse in 2017, came back stronger, haven't looked back since. Sometimes hard-headed people, we need that
Guilty.
rock bottom experience to move us forward. And from that, we've got to learn to be kind to ourselves, and we've got to practice forgiveness so that we can facilitate growth. Forgiveness was a huge part for me. I could not forgive myself for my relapse, for the stuff that I did in my relapse. And it took me, at the advice of my sponsor, to spend time every morning when I wake up, look at myself in the mirror and say, I love you, I forgive you. Now, I didn't mean it, but I continue to say it.
Right.
Took 2 years, 2 full years of doing
Before
it.
you started believing yourself.
And I finally started being able to forgive myself. And it's key. We've got to forgive ourselves.
So let me ask you a crazy question. You know, I normally don't ask a lot of questions. Let me ask you a crazy one. So if I ask you to name the top 5 people that you love, could you do it?
Top 5 people?
Top 5.
Yeah, I could do it.
Go ahead.
All right. Number 1, myself. Number 2, my wife. Number 3, my oldest daughter. Number 4, my middle daughter. Number 5, my youngest daughter.
Very good, sir.
We've got to include that self-love.
That's where I was headed. Do you understand, like, you know, at being a life coach, you know, or helping people through some situations, that's a question that I ask. Right around the middle of when we're starting to work on some things, I'll start to ask, so just name off some people that you love, you know, that you trust, that you could go talk to. Do you understand nobody ever lists themselves?
Yeah.
Not one person. 95% of the time, not one person will ever list themselves.
I believe that.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Because, like, that means you're not saying you're not thinking of yourself. Like, your recovery has to be a little selfish, or you're not going to make it.
What's that quote? My recovery has to come first so that everything that I love does not come last.
Right. You know, I fell into the trap of trying to save everybody that I came in contact with instead of just being the example that they could see. Oh, dude, it was crazy. Yeah, it was bad. But then I started reviewing some of my, you know, I started going through my step 4 process, and I started really kind of reviewing where my part was and why I felt the way I was feeling. Even recently, I've had to go back and review some things when we were talking about grace in our last CR lesson. I started really kind of digging into, like, why do I feel like I deserve grace? Or why do I feel like I don't deserve grace?
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons to the way I'm thinking right now? Because I don't know if you remember how dark I looked. It was crazy because I felt like I was on my last leg. But what was I neglecting? My recovery. I've had to take a step back out of some positions just to understand my recovery better. You know, because I was so focused on everybody else.
And that's a trait that we fall into when we get into recovery leadership. And I think that's a good place for us to take just a moment to take a break and to hear a word from our wonderful sponsors. But don't go anywhere, because we just heard 4 great tips. And when we come back after this ad break, we have 4 more. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. The Unashamed Recovery Podcast is heard around the world in over 42 countries, including over 780 cities in all 50 states, right here in the good old US of A. People around the world are hearing the message of the hope of recovery from addiction, and that's because of listeners just like you who donate, but it's also because of our fantastic sponsors. Local sponsors like D's Automotive here in Meridian, Mississippi, serving the East Central Mississippi and West Alabama area for over 42 years. D's is a name that you can trust when it comes to your vehicle. You know, I'm picky about my ride. I don't want nobody touching it that I don't trust. Well, I can trust the guys at D's Automotive, and you can trust them for all of your complete car care needs and service and towing and car unlocks. That's D's Automotive. So head over and go by and see Miss Jeannie, Mike, and the boys at 5024 Poplar Springs Drive. That's 5024 Poplar Springs Drive in Meridian, or give them a call, 601-482-1800. 601-482-1800. And tell them that Josh and Drew sent you.
Unashamed Recovery is also sponsored internationally by SoberLife.love, a sober dating site made for the sober community. Are you tired of the dating scene revolving around alcohol and drugs? Do you want to find someone who shares your commitment to a sober lifestyle? Look no further than SoberLife.love. The Sober Life Love platform is specifically designed for individuals who are sober and seeking a partner who shares in the same values, whether you're in recovery, prefer not to drink, or simply choose to live a sober lifestyle. We provide a safe and supportive community for you to connect with like-minded individuals. With our advanced matching algorithms, you can find compatible partners who understand your journey and respect your choices. From sober activities to meaningful conversations, our dating services offers a variety of ways to connect and build relationships. SoberLife.love is the new way to connect with people who understand and support your journey. Join today for free at www.soberlife.love. www.soberlife.love. Now, back to your normally scheduled program right here on Unashamed Recovery Podcast.
That's right. We're back. Your boys, Josh and Drew, holding it down. We just talked about 4 great ways that we can kind of get out of that bad behavior and get into good habits. Those were the importance of self-awareness and self-care, developing new coping mechanisms, addressing underlying issues and trauma, and practicing self-compassion and forgiveness. And while that right there is a good list in itself, there's more. That's right. We have more for free. Doesn't cost you anything, for free. The next one that we're going to talk about is the power of faith.
Man, that's a good one.
Yes.
I've spent many of, I call them wartime prayers, where I'm on my knees pouring into my faith. I'm not doing anything. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just pouring into my faith.
There's been times where I can't say anything. I've laid on the bed, sprawled out, bawling my eyes out because I'm just hanging on for dear life, trying to make it another second in my sobriety. I can't say anything. Like, I have no words, but man, there's a verse, and I cannot think of it. I can't think of it, but it talks about how the Holy Spirit will intercede for us, for our groanings, and it will take it to the Father. When we don't know what to pray, the Holy Spirit helps us to know.
I've spent some ugly cry days.
Oh,
man, where I didn't have the words. Yeah. All I had was faith.
You know, faith is what helps us to lean on our spiritual beliefs. And it helps us to trust in our higher power. You know, at the core, the essentialness of, our recovery is our higher power.
He's got to be the cornerstone. Like I said earlier, I mean, if he's not the foundation, it's gonna crumble.
Yeah,
and that's. And I'm not saying it's our way or the highway. I mean, everybody has their own recovery program that they follow. Some people have just the higher power. But I'm telling you right now what I believe.
Oh, yeah. I support all the different ways of recovery. I mean, we've
talked about Dharma recovery. We talked about Ricky. We've
talked about smart recovery. And we've talked about several different paths, and that's fine. But here's the thing, because whatever works to get you sober. Because I can't save a dead person.
Yeah.
Like, if you have died in your addiction, there's
you can't
nothing,
call them out to Lazarus tomb. I mean,
the first things first, let's get the person sober and, get them in the path to recovery that works best for them, whether it be jail, whether it be drug court, whether it be smart recovery, whether it be celebrate recovery. Whew. Whatever it may be. Yeah. Get them down that road, get them sober, and then, then let's have that talk.
But, but like we were saying earlier, before the break, we were going into the way we think. And we were talking about the New Testament. I get off track because of my ADD sometimes, but let's go back around to that. So as you think, one more time, is how you feel. How you feel is what controls your actions. You know, what you feel is what you'll act out. What you act out is what people see. Yeah. You know, it's kind of like the iceberg effect. You know, you see the top of the iceberg, but, you know, below there, the iceberg's a lot bigger. You try to avoid the top of the iceberg, which would be actions and behaviors, you know, but you're missing the bigger picture and you're still wrecking the ship. The bigger picture is everything that leads up to. Yeah. You know, actions, behaviors, worldview. How do you view yourself? What is your views on recovery? Your recovery? You know, what are your views on your faith? Those are honest questions.
Yeah.
You know, these are questions that you probably need to sit down and ask yourself, because I know when I asked myself these questions, that was tough. You know, I had to really sit down with myself and say, what are my actual views on recovery? And then because I was finding my identity in my recovery, not in my recovery, but I was finding my recovery identity in somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, I would hear something from this person. I would take that. That was my identity. Or I'd hear something else from this other person. That was my identity. I wasn't letting God form my own identity in my recovery. But when I started to let him shape and mold me himself, and by faith, and by changing the way I think about it, you know, new perspectives, man, it really started to shake some stuff loose. What is it Stu says, or, you know,
not to rust out?
Yeah, man, it's starting to knock some rust out. You know, it's just...
and that's where you find the strength to overcome those old ways.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, the faith is that foundation where we kind of are able to embrace positive behaviors, because as you know, we're following our faith, and as an example of that, we're embracing that positive behavior of that.
But that's why it's so important to journal, to read your Bible on a daily basis. I mean, moment by moment, if you have
daily inventory.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the things that I had to pick up this go around when I came back off my relapse was I had to do a daily inventory. I've got to keep on top of it. If I'm not on top of my daily inventory, I get behind. I'll forget. I'll be under. I'll get into the negative.
Right.
And for me to have to climb out of that and catch back up, no. I'd rather just stay on top of it. Daily inventory, keep up with my stuff.
So it just makes you feel like you're spiritually bankrupt if you don't get to do that on a daily basis. You know, it's definitely. It's what routine. How do you want to see yourself? Is how you should start acting. That's just it. You know, in a nutshell, I wanted to be clean. So I had to start telling myself I can't go do these things that I used to do as a person that used to get high all the time. I can't sit here and go hang out with friends that are drinking and doing this or doing that. But, you know, I've gotten to a point now where I can comfortably hang around somebody who's drinking alcohol, because, I mean, obviously I can't get away from it. It's just everywhere. But I can sit around, but I know my limit. I know where what I can handle and what I cannot. What I can be around and what I cannot.
Yeah.
But that took a lot of time.
Most definitely. It doesn't happen overnight.
No.
That's like with Stacy talking about how now she can serve her trigger food. She can serve it at the church potluck.
It's crazy, right?
I mean, imagine that.
But I mean, it's you know, that's all these people do that do this hypnosis thing. That's all they're doing. They're changing their mind. Yeah. You know, but it's up to you. You have to change your mind.
Yeah.
You know, if you want a healthy recovery, I mean, you have to dig into yourself and really start living out what you want.
Well, and that right there moves us right into our next topic. Emphasize that change is possible. We have to make that notice in our life that change is possible. That, hey, I can change. So many of us come into recovery thinking, I am who I am. I'm stuck this way. I've always been this way. I'm always going to be this way. I cannot change, or we're unworthy of change.
But I mean, the one question that I would always ask was, have you really naturally always been this way?
Yeah.
And I mean, that sounds like a smart aleck answer, but it's really not. I mean, my biggest goal is to make you think about it for you. That's the best way I can help somebody through their recovery. When you tell me, I've always been this way, no, something's affected your life to make you this way. Because I remember at one point, you know, I was a kid that used to love paper airplanes, drawing cats and dogs on paper. Thought I was the best artist in the world, probably like chicken scratch. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, my belief was I was an artist. So if you see where I'm going with this, it's something changed our mind. Some trauma changed our mind down the road, but we've got to figure out where the fork in the road happened. But we can't do it alone.
Yep. Well, and that goes back to Proverbs 3, I think it's 5 through 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Talking about, I've always done this way, or I can't change. That's a lack of understanding.
Yeah.
Lean in.
I mean, you're limiting yourself.
Yeah.
If you say that, you're putting a limit on yourself. You're basically cuffing yourself up again and putting yourself in another chain and shackle.
Yep.
That's fear when you break it down. That's fear and that's anxiety. Just like you called out the codependency just a second ago. That's all that is when you break it down. Fear and anxiety. And it's going to cripple you to a fact that you're never going to change.
And fear will hold you captive,
hold
you hostage. What's that Zach Williams song? Fear's a liar.
Yeah.
I will hold off and I won't sing that for y'all. I know how much y'all are wanting to hear me with the pops, but I'll save you.
We're trying to keep the listeners, Josh.
Sometimes with our change, we think that if we stumble, we're not making progress. Sometimes progress may involve stumbling, but the key here is continuous effort.
Yeah,
like if we're
consistency.
If we're stumbling, but we're getting back up, that's progress.
Consistency. Yeah, I mean that's the biggest part. Be consistent, but think of your recovery like a bank account. If you're constantly spending time and energy on the wrong part of your recovery, not focusing on the parts that really matter, and there's ways to do that where you're focusing on just staying clean and just staying away, not really digging in and doing the work on self. That's the safe way to play it.
Yep.
Right? Yep. If you're doing that, you caged yourself again. You're not giving yourself any kind of leeway for that change to happen.
And you're bankrupt.
Your recovery is just depleted at that point because you've used all your time and energy on the wrong, if you're focusing on the wrong thing, Yep. It's just about, once again, when you notice the patterns you're taking, I mean, that's when stuff starts to change for you.
Yeah. So moving on along, our next one, and I believe this would be number 6. I done lost count. Either way, our next one is maintenance and growth for those already in recovery. If you're already in recovery, we always have to be maintaining our recovery that we've already earned. We have to keep up that maintenance. It's kind of like your house. You got to go out there and you got to cut the yard. You got to trim down the bushes. You got to sweep the leaves out of the gutter. You got to, take care of your building because if you're not doing those things, it's going to sneak up on you and you're going to wake up one day and realize, wow, I have not been doing a good job
of keeping my side of the street clean. I know people know that terminology.
Yeah. If we want to get out of these bad behaviors, we got to maintain what we've already established.
Right. But we got to build upon it too, though.
Yes.
I mean, you maintain where you're at, but as you're maintaining, you also want to compile something else better on top.
Add to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, like you said, it's like a building, but
I got an idea.
What?
Serve. Give back to your recovery. Step 12.
Because the only way I can keep what I have is to give it away.
Yes. Go and serve the program that has given you second life. Oh, and that's pretty cut, short, dry. It is what it is on that one. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then our last one, you've got to realize you're not alone. You're amongst great company because everybody in the recovery community is sitting right where you're at.
Yep.
I hate to break it to you, you're not special. That your parents lied to you. You're not special. You're just like everybody else who's going through this program. We take it one day at a time. We take it one step at a time. It's a process.
Yep.
The good news is there is hope. There is healing. And you've also got support from a great community. I've been a part of a lot of communities in my life, and there's none better than the recovery community.
Oh man, it's family wherever you go.
Yes,
we've gone several places and spoke, and I mean everywhere is treated as like family.
everyone supports everyone.
Yep.
You've got people that's in your corner to help encourage you, but also to help guide you through this process, because you're going to need somebody that's further along than you are to help get you out of bad behaviors and into the good ones. And with that, that's all we've got for this episode. We talked about a lot of big things, great things. We gave you a good list to go off of. So thank you for tuning in to another episode of Unashamed Recovery Podcast. We hope that you have found this helpful.
Please
and
use this
encouraging.
information. I mean, that's just use this information. Even if it might not be the best form of the information, but take some of what we said and use it as a platform to kind of like start building your own viewpoints. That way you kind of understand where God's really sending you. Everybody's recovery is their own.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the biggest part to take from this is your recovery is your recovery. It's not your leader's recovery. It's your recovery.
Not your sponsors.
No, it's yours. So treat it like a baby if you have to.
That's right. So if you're wanting more recovery content, head over and visit our brand new website. That's unashamedrecovery.com. And we've got sobriety and recovery themed blogs that can take you deeper into your sobriety and your recovery journey. And that's where you're also going to find all the links to our social media. You can sign up to be a guest to come on and share your story. Or if you want to come on and talk about a topic, you can do all that there. You can also donate to the show there to help us reach more people still lost in the darkness of addiction. And also, if you're wanting more great recovery podcasts, head over, check out the Take 12 Recovery Radio Recovery Podcast Network. We're so thankful to be a part of this Recovery Podcast Network. There's many, many more great recovery podcasts out there. That link is going to be in our show notes. And check it out. And don't forget, every Sunday we're releasing brand new episodes of the Recovery Minute. And those are just short and encouraging biblical words that help keep you going strong in your daily recovery journey. And that's all we've got for this episode. It's been a pleasure. Remember to stay sober, and above all else, keep on 12-stepping as you stay unashamed. We love y'all.
See you guys.